I've always been a lover of music, all kinds, and I love to sing. The beauty of voices twined together, each part distinct but dancing on the edges of each other. It's pure joy. I have sung in a cappella girl groups, albinettes, and my high school's choir, gospel choirs, the Capitol Pride Choir, the UU Choir. Singing in choirs has afforded me the gift of engaging with people who may not look like me, nor believe as I do, or love as I do. And I have built lasting relationships with people from various ethnicities, beliefs, and genders. Analysts and scholars have spent energy determining why we're divided, why a seemingly unbridgeable gap exists between you and me. So, what is it that separates us? Politics, families, religion, socioeconomic status, who we love, our gender. Me, Black woman, theist, you, lover of music, art, dancing, lover and loved, daughter, sister, mother, grandmother, reader, gender, a gardener, hiker, canoeer, camper. What divides me from most folks is my skin color, which in their minds means a different race. Ironically, we all share the same ancestors. We are all one race. Off the top of my head, I've named several things that I am, and Black and woman is only two of them. A Venn diagram would identify logical sets between all of us. Social media and isolation exacerbate our differences, but proximity and time spent together open us to the truth of our shared humanity. The choirs I've been a part of made room for the time it takes to build relationships, to build community, to release the 2D distortion of who I or you may think some people are or were, and see commonality. Mothers, fathers, sisters, sons, brothers, gardeners, hikers, bikers, lovers and loved, human.
I am honored and grateful to be with you this morning to tell you a little bit about my journey here at UUSS. I speak only from my own limited experience in the relatively short time I have been a member here, but I hope my perspective will be of some interest to you and use to you. I'm going to talk about the UU commitment to inclusion, in what way we succeed, some ways we fail, how we can do better, and how all of this has affected me personally. I arrived here 4.5 years ago, a slightly butch lesbian feminist Buddhist from the San Francisco Bay Area. When I got here to the capital region, I had to face many differences from California besides just the irascible weather. I encountered sociocultural and demographic differences that I was not prepared for. There was more sexual and gender stereotyping here, and less awareness of LGBTQ history and culture, and too few lesbians. In California, most of my friends were lesbians, and I was surrounded by LGBTQ people, as well as a larger community that had been influenced by our presence, our numbers, and our activism over the space of decades. I came to UU Schenectady thinking there would be a large contingent of LGBTQ folks here. Such was not the case. Well-meaning members of the congregation sent confusing messages as I searched for connection with what I had come to see as my people. Costumes for the biannual revels were strictly delineated into what was supposed to be for the men and what was supposed to be for the women, long waist-hugging dresses and frilly headpieces that I could never wear. There were also deeper issues of decision-making and institutional governance that made me uncomfortable, but of which I was only dimly aware at the time. I questioned whether I belonged here, whether UU was really for me. 3 major things transformed my experience: participating in Wellspring Sources, attending the Transforming Hearts Collective course on transgender awareness at Albany UU, and becoming a facilitator for OWL. The Wellspring experience was wonderful, and I recommend it to anyone who has not yet participated in it. Reading and listening to so many different approaches to life's mysteries, learning about the many spiritual sources for UU theological and spiritual perspectives, having the opportunity to share my own spiritual journey and listen to that of the other participants. And last but not least, having the challenge of choosing and working with a spiritual director. All of these enriched my spiritual life. But I was not initially enamored of the Wellspring program or the material we studied. I remember that at the beginning of the course, it was suggested that we find 2 stones. One of them, I think, was supposed to be smooth, and the other a bit of a rough surface. One was supposed to represent our positive feelings toward the course, the other to represent things that might prevent us from being fully present, our negative feelings. We were asked at one point to throw the one represented negative feelings away. I found this simple ritual something that went counter to my beliefs and practices as a Buddhist and as a psychotherapist as well. In Theravada meditation practice, the tradition that I follow, we are taught to accept and to investigate whatever arises and not to judge our feelings as good or bad. We are invited to encourage positive mind states, but at the same time, to accept everything, to reject nothing, to cultivate curiosity and an open mind. Through this process, transformation occurs, for everything changes, and we do not want to be at war with ourselves. So it is with therapy. We explore the dark places in order to heal. In this Wellspring class, I could say so. I could say how I felt and modify my own practice of the ritual to express my own belief. I carried my skepticism and doubt when I encountered other things that I found that did not conform with my own knowledge or my understanding of UU principles. I encountered certain habits of mind that keep us from being truly welcoming and inclusive and keep us from being able to communicate across our differences. The first of these is assuming that we are all alike, that similarities exist where they do not. For example, one of the early readings was from Parker Palmer. Now, Parker Palmer is a thoughtful man and has a lot of wise things to share. But like you and me, he is limited by his own worldview. In this case, a Christian and a Quaker. The problem comes in when we make generalizations about other religions that the problem comes in when he makes generalizations about other religions that he really doesn't know about or understand. He made the statement that all religions believe in a soul or self. Buddhists call it a big self or self with a capital S, he says. I've been a student and practitioner of Buddhism for many years, but I think even the casual student would know that a basic tenet of Buddhist philosophy is the concept of no self. The second of these habits of mind they encountered is a misuse of the word we. In Unitarian Universalism, the word we includes multitudes of beliefs and worldviews. There's really no one UU theology in the sense of a system of beliefs, a creed. What unites us are our principles and our commitment to building a community where love calls each of us to our highest self, speaking our own truths in all our diversity. It is not about what we believe. but about how we promise to be together. This misuse of the word we is demonstrated in the article Earth-Centered Traditions by Carolyn Brown. This is in part a beautiful summary of some of the earth and nature-based traditions of Europe and North America as they relate to the adoption of our sixth source, spiritual teachings of earth-centered traditions which celebrate the sacred circle of life and instruct us to live in harmony with the rhythms of nature. But when she tries to compare these traditions with what she considers the preferences and prejudices of modern people, she falls into a common mistake. She uses we in a way that includes others without their consent, as it were, while othering the people whose beliefs she has just so beautifully described. We, she writes, prefer knowledge that we can back up with authority. Our prejudice is for knowledge that is found in books rather than in practice. As a Buddhist and a feminist, I found that I really did not fit her description of a modern person, and she has othered and excluded the people she has just described. Being able to confront these examples of exclusion rather than inclusion helped me to form a basis for my own understanding of how to better communicate with others who may be different from me. If it clarified for me what I felt needed to be transformed in order for UU to be truly inclusive, to draw the circle wide, and to include me. Wellspring was a positive experience for me. Through Wellspring, I felt heard, I felt accepted. I began to feel that I truly did belong at UUSS, and there was a place for all of me, not just the parts that fit some kind of standard. I was able to bring my doubts and have them transformed. The next transformative experience for me was the course on transgender inclusion by the Transforming Hearts Collective offered by Albany UU in 2019. One aspect of this course was a focus on cultural values, not just the surface ones, but the underlying ones that are reflected in institutions and daily practices, for example. For example, institutionalized white supremacy culture and hierarchical organization. This course clarified for me an awareness of my own underlying values that I bring to UU from my prior experiences. In clarifying my values, I was able to see how much I valued the shared leadership and leadership from the margins that are central to lesbian feminism, 12-step programs, and LGBTQ civil rights activism. I was able to understand my antipathy and discomfort toward certain hierarchical aspects of the Unitarian Church and UUSS in particular, and then to communicate this in ways that could be understood by others and acted upon by myself. When Reverend Lynn asked me for volunteers to lead the summer Sunday services, I accepted gladly and felt so grateful that an important part of my value system, shared leadership, was being supported, acknowledged, and put into practice. This transgender inclusion course, although I am not trans, awakened in me the sense that connection and communication across our differences was possible. This freed me from the limitation of where I could belong, who I could connect with, who were my people. I came to feel that the degree to which I belonged in a congregation was up to me. I could see that it was possible to communicate one's values and experiences with others who are not like me, and to do so in a way that fosters connection and community. My third important experience with UU was becoming an OWL facilitator. Here I felt able to make a contribution based on my own knowledge, understanding, and experience. I believe that OWL is so important to our young people. The training brought to mind the difficulties I had as a young adult in navigating sexual relationships without having a clue and feeling the pressure to pretend I knew what I did not know in order to be accepted and to avoid embarrassment. I had no knowledge of how to form healthy relationships. I had only prejudice to guide me in the realm of sexual orientation. When I became a facilitator this spring, I became aware of how outdated some of the material was that had been published more than 20 years ago. It was outdated not just in terms of transgender awareness, for example, but more deeply. There had been a lack of understanding of the way to understand others and communicate about differences. For example, good intentions and empathy are no substitute for knowledge gained by listening and learning about their experience. A lesson on disability is a good example. Participants were encouraged to imagine themselves having a disability and then to act out what they imagined. This could easily descend into mockery and disrespect. What we actually did and what was suggested by UUA revisions was to show videos of actual disabled people as they dealt with various aspects of their sexuality. I was appalled by some of the old lessons, but also heartened by the advances that had been made as the material was being revised. In summary, I would like to mention some ways in which people are excluded and marginalized, and some actions we can all take to avoid these mistakes. First, assuming we're all alike is a common mistake. There is no UU melting pot. We each bring with us our unique self and our unique experience. Do not, for example, assume that someone is cisgender and or heterosexual. Do not assume that someone else's religion or belief system is like yours. Next, assuming that you know what someone's experience is like, good intentions and empathy are no substitute for knowledge. I try to approach others with humility, acknowledge I have something to learn. I try to educate myself, ask the person involved, read books, explore the internet, make contact. I try to be aware of my own stereotypes around such things as age, class, race, ethnicity, disability, or gender. A couple years ago, there was an article in UU World that offended the transgender community because it was written about transgender people by someone without knowledge or experience rather than by transgender people themselves. I can share my own experience with this mistake. I have worked with and socialized with Black and African American people my entire adult life. I learned by talking with and listening to my friends, clients, and colleagues and reading widely. I thought I knew something about racism. But when I read The New Jim Crow by Michelle Alexander, I realized I hadn't known half of it. There's always more to learn about people's lives who embody experiences that may be very different from our own. Another example is trivializing, minimizing, and dehumanizing. I encountered several examples of this in old material from the Welcoming Congregation Handbook and from old OWL material. I hope that this sort of material is gone for good. Misusing the word we. When we say we, there is an us and a them. I was guilty of us them thinking when I assumed that only LGBTQ people could understand me and connect with me. I know that I have used the word we in some context in giving this talk. I have tried to be vigilant, but sometimes felt I couldn't get around it. Sometimes I have substituted the word I instead. What are the tools I have learned that can help accomplish this task of drawing the circle of inclusion wide? Respect boundaries. While I work to make the circle wide, I also sometimes need to meet with others who share my experience and worldview. Honesty and transparency. I try to share honestly about myself. I can communicate better when I know myself, my culture, and my values. Service. Giving service is a good way to make connections with others and feel included in the group. Participation. I found that participating in smaller groups was a way to get to know people and feel a part of the larger congregation. Acceptance. None of us is perfect. We all make mistakes. Acceptance of oneself and others is key. I'm brought to mind the words of that song, "There's a crack in everything." That's how the light gets in. In preparing this talk, I've had to forget my desire to make the perfect offering. I can only hope that some light is shed on a topic that is both important to me and at times difficult for me. I would like to close with this quote from Spilling the Light by Teresa I. Soto, the minister of the UU Church of Oakland, California. The thing you must be is yourself, unadulterated, shedding the willingness to journey alone, as though you are made of something hard and unforgivable. You are human. You belong right here, right now, and together we will chase away the sickness, the secrets, and leave only the open possibility that the future is a space for growth. Thank you.